What's going on, everybody? It's Joel here. Today we're going to be taking a look at the grips from Reyllen Fitness. So it's been a couple years since I've taken a look at anything from Reyllen Fitness. I think back in 2018 I took a look at their Bumblebee grips, and they were the X2 model at the time. And while I did like them, they just didn't end up being my favorite grips. Though, the more and more I used them, I found out what I really loved them for, and that was ring muscle-ups. And I still think to this day, they're still some of the best grips for ring muscle-ups. But for bar stuff, I think that they were just okay. They were definitely one of the more comfortable grips, but just overall, I tend to find myself gravitating more towards a more just grippy grip in general. So today, we're gonna be taking a look at their whole X4 lineup, which is their most current lineup of grips, and they are all fingerless grips, though they do come in fingered options as well, though I think fingerless grips are just more popular nowadays. We're gonna be taking a look at their entire lineup of grips, and I'm gonna tell you which ones that I think are the best and what I think they're the best for. And though there are 4 different types of grips in their lineup, and each one kind of has their own characteristics, I'm gonna tell you which one you should buy if you could only buy a single grip. And keep in mind that grips are mainly a preferential kind of thing. I'm gonna tell you which ones that I like and what I think are good, but you might think otherwise, and you might prefer a different grip style. So without further ado, we're gonna first take a look at one of their newer grips, and this is their Panda grip. And obviously it's called the Panda grip for a reason, because the actual grip is white, and then the wristband is just, it's black. And I guess that's how they came up with the naming. But either way, this is a synthetic grip, and all of Reyllen's grips are fairly thin. They're under 2 millimeters thin. I think this is like 1.8 millimeters, but don't quote me on that. And like I said, it is a synthetic material, and it's just a single piece, and what you get on the outside is what you get in the inside of the grip. And I think overall, this is a very good daily comfortable grip. It offers good grip on coated bars, on uncoated bars, on rings. It's pretty good. It does have a little bit of a shape to it, so you will notice the creases when you're doing ring muscle-ups. And this one is probably the least affected by any kind of sweat. You definitely have to use chalk with this grip. So if you don't like to use chalk with like some of the newer grips that are like chalkless grips, this is not gonna be the one for you. You have to use a lot of chalk with this grip. But it does work for pretty much any application you wanna use it for. And it's a very good and comfortable day-to-day grip. So the weak spot with this grip is that it's just not the grippiest one in Reyllen's lineup, though I do think it is fine for day-to-day training, and that's what I would actually recommend it for. Even though it doesn't have the most amount of stick to a bar, it's plenty. And I think when you're doing your training, you should still work on your grip strength. And that's why I think that probably out of all of Reyllen's lineup, these are the best for just day-to-day training purposes. All right, so the next ones up are gonna be the Bumblebee grips in the X4 model. So like I said before, all of the grips that we're taking a look at today are going to be the X4, the brand new design from Reyllen. And what's different about this design is that it has a reinforced area by the wrist wrap, and that's gonna make it so these are not going to tear in that area when you fling them over the bar and you put all that torque on top of them. There is a slight curvature for the way that your fingers are shaped, and then it's very comfortable to hold pretty much all of these on a just normal bar. The wrist strap is pretty comfortable on the Bumblebees and the Pandas. It can get a little bit hard on the Merlins and the Gecko grips, in which we're going to take a look at those in 1 second. But for those ones, I definitely recommend using some kind of sweatband. With the Pandas and the Bumblebees, you don't necessarily need that sweatband. So this is the Bumblebee grip. It still has that same microfiber material, and this material is the most comfortable grip material that I have ever used. It's soft, it's plush, and molds to pretty much anything that you can fling it over, and including rings. So a lot of grips, a lot of the more rigid and grippy grips are pretty bad to use with rings. I mean, they provide pretty good grip, but they're just uncomfortable because they make all sorts of folds. So most grips are not gonna lay perfectly on top of that ring unless they are soft and pliable like the Bumblebee grips. So these ones are also pretty good on coated bars and uncoated bars. You definitely have to load these grips up with chalk. Don't think that you can use them without chalk if you're planning on doing any kind of bar work. But I think for a day-to-day training grip, they should provide enough grip. They're not as grippy as the Panda grips, and these ones are a little bit more affected by sweat, but there is no better grip to do ring muscle-ups on. And if you could buy one grip just to do ring muscle-ups with, I would recommend that you get the Bumblebee grips. They're extremely comfortable, they hold rings pretty well, and they still allow you to turn your hands over the ring pretty quickly, which is one of the things that I don't really care for with some of the really grippy, really sticky grips. I feel like they make me a little bit slower when I do my ring muscle-ups. But the Bumblebee grips, I think that these ones are extremely comfortable, really good for ring muscle-ups, decent enough for bar work. But if I was to choose between these and the Panda grips just overall, I think now I would go with the Panda grips over the Bumblebee grips. But I definitely am gonna keep these around to do just ring muscle-ups with. And if you plan on getting these for ring muscle-ups, I definitely recommend getting the ones with holes because it's kind of awkward to fling the grip over into the ring and get it in a good spot without the finger holes. All right, so the next grips up are gonna be the Gecko grips from Reyllen. Mine are all chalked up here, but these are kind of like their carbon grips. And unlike normal carbon grips, these ones actually have a texture to the surface. There's not just a pattern on it, there's actually a texture. And these ones actually are different than most like textured grips in that chalk doesn't completely destroy these. The only thing that affects these a little bit is sweat. Not that much. You can still definitely get away with using these if you just kind of powder on some more chalk, but sweat does affect these grips. So these ones have a texturized outside, and then the inside has the same kind of microfiber that you'd find on the Bumblebee grip. So using these is still pretty comfortable, though I will say these grips are a little bit more on the rigid side. So they do put kind of a strain on your wrist when you're doing like bar work. So I recommend using these with sweatbands to protect your wrists. Another problem with these ones is that they are a little bit on the rigid side. So while they do offer good grip for rings, they crumple up and they're really uncomfortable to hold onto for ring muscle ups. But for bar work, these are actually pretty good. You can use them, like I said before, with or without chalk. Chalk definitely does help these grips out. And whether it's a powder coated bar or an uncoated bar, grip is excellent with these grips. Now, one thing that is worrisome with these grips is that they are already deteriorating, and I think that's because they're just so rigid. The surface is coming off the microfiber part. And while I don't think that these are gonna rip anytime soon, that's definitely something that is limited to just these grips in Reyllen's complete lineup. Another weird thing about these grips is that they're kind of in a weird spot in Reyllen's lineup. They're not the most comfortable grips, and they're also not the grippiest ones. They're affected by water and sweat. So while I do like these grips, I don't think I can recommend them over the next grip that we're gonna take a look at. And that grip is the Merlin grips. And just like the name would suggest, these grips are like magic. These grips are extremely sticky. These are the most competition-focused grip out of Reyllen's complete lineup. It does have a rubberized surface on the exterior, and on the interior, it kind of has a material similar to the Panda grip, which is not as soft as the Bumblebee grips, but I found that it's still plenty comfortable. Like the Gecko grips, you are definitely gonna wanna wear sweatbands with these because it's gonna torque on your wrist quite a bit when you're doing longer sets of gymnastics movements. These are unaffected by water, they're unaffected by chalk. I actually think chalk actually helps these out, unlike some of the other rubberized grips on the market. These ones do kind of have a shape to them, but it's not as bad as on the Gecko grip. So when you do ring muscle-ups with these, they perform just fine. It's comfortable enough, they don't make any kind of weird creases. Not as comfortable as the Bumblebee grips, of course, but comfortable enough to the point where it's not gonna really bother you when you're doing longer sets of ring muscle ups. So these grips have quickly become some of my just favorite grips in general because of the versatility of these grips. You can use them for anything. Sweat doesn't affect them, chalk doesn't affect them. So if you have a gym where you can't really control the bar's cleanliness, these are going to be a great option for you. And that's the reason why I would probably just go with these over the Gecko grips. Even though the Gecko grips are maybe a little bit cheaper, I don't think that the difference in price is worth skipping over the Merlin grips for the Gecko grips. And if you could only buy a single grip in Raylin's lineup, it's definitely gonna be the Merlin grips. These are excellent, excellent grips. So when you go to size all of these grips, I'm gonna recommend that you go with your typical grip size. I had always been wearing mediums in the past, but I recently switched to large because somebody actually said that I should be using large. And I didn't think that I had big hands in the first place, but this is what it looks like on my hand. It's not awkwardly long or anything. It fits my hand just fine. And it's also not too long to make it awkward for doing ring muscle ups. Now, if you could buy 2 grips in all of Raylin's lineup, then I would probably go with the Merlin grips and the Bumblebee grips, just because I would just use the Bumblebee grips for just strictly ring muscle ups. And if you wanted a good day-to-day grip to complement just about anything, I would go with the Panda grips. The Gecko grips, like I said, I do like them, but they're in a weird spot and they don't really have a good use compared to all of Raylin's other grips. So that concludes it. If you guys have any questions about Raylin's grips, feel free to leave them in the comment section. And as always, guys, please hit that like button, subscribe, and thanks for watching.